And to tell us more about the joint training as well as reasons behind what might have led North Korea to scrap the joint performance at Mount Kumgang, we're now joined by Professor Kim Hyun-wook from the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
All right, so despite numerous concerns after North Korea called off the joint cultural performance at Mount Kumgang, the joint training session at Masikryong Ski Resort started today as planned.
Yes, I think it was, finally decided that we would just hold this scheduled, joint training, ski training at the Masikryong Ski Resort. I think there have been some, unilateral, messages delivered from the North Korea. I don't know why they canceled the, Kumgang Mountain cultural performance, but I think there will be lot of guesses and, projectors about why they canceled it. Maybe that's because they have some hard time preparing the performance. They were kind of expecting some kinds of provision of diesel oil to North Korea from South Korea, which has not been achieved because of the international sanctions on North Korea and so on and so forth. But finally, they have agreed upon the Masikryong Ski Resort joint training, ski training, and also that would also be some part of the violations of international sanctions, but they managed to hold that training. So I think that's something that would still continue the momentum of North-South Korea dialogue and cooperation, I think.
As you just mentioned about the sanctions, now I think what's notable is that our athletes and coaches took a charter flight to North Korea's airport. Now, how did this happen? I mean, wouldn't the use of an airplane to transport South Koreans to North Korea violate U.S. sanctions against the North?
Yes, according to, it's not the UN Security Council resolution, it's the United States unilateral sanctions. Which stipulates that the airplane that is coming out of the North Korea or visits North Korea come out, they are not allowed to come to the United States for 180 days. So if any planes that goes to the Masikryong Ski Resort, South Korean airplane, that is not allowed to visit the United States. So I think there have been some discussions and coordinations between two countries, U.S. and South Korea, about these sanction measures. And I think the United States and South Korea have agreed that this time it would be exceptions of the United States unilateral sanctions. So they finally, got an agreement for this, ski exercises in Masikryong Ski Resort.
Now, going back to North Korea calling off the joint cultural performance at Mount Kumgang, now the regime kind of appeared to be displeased with the South Korean news reports over North Korea holding its military parade to celebrate the 70th anniversary of its foundation of its military on the eve of the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. Tell us more about this.
I think the parade in Pyongyang, I think that's completely domestic event. I mean, we already witnessed many parades in Beijing in which President Park Geun-hye visited before. So I think the major purpose of all these kinds of parades is to mobilize the people inside North Korea, to make them much more consolidated under the Kim Jong-un regime. So I think when there comes some criticisms from the South Korean media about these parades, I think North Korea can accept these kinds of criticisms against the Kim Jong-un regime. So I think that is some kinds of criticism that is somewhat acceptable. But I think North Korea intends to use these kinds of excuses to tame South Korea. I mean, North Korea has a lot of purposes for the current moves to reach the rapprochement with South Korea.
Right.
And in the process of it, I think North Korea wants to tame South Korea so that it can get what it wants to get from South Korea.
Now, what could be some of the other reasons then behind North Korea's abrupt cancellation of the joint cultural event at Mount Kumgang?
I don't know. There are no clear regions pronounced by North Korea, but maybe you can guess that some difficulties in the North Korean side to prepare for the performance. I heard that it takes for about 5 hours to come to the performance center from Pyongyang city. The road condition is not very good. So it's very tedious work to do to get there and get prepared. And also, I think performance center has not been used very often. So there might be some a lot of measures to be made there to get prepared for the performance center. But I think one more important reason would be that North Korea has requested the provision of diesel oil, by South Korea for the operations of the performance center, which is definitely the violation of UN Security Council sanctions. So South Korean oil company rejected it. And I think that kinds of rejection by South Korean company and might have made North Korea get angry. Maybe no need for further discussions or performances in the center, I think.
So they definitely felt the pressure of being exposed as well. And now, South Korean Defense Minister Song Young-moo said during a forum in Singapore on Monday that North Korea may be, quote, wiped off the map if it used nuclear weapons against the U.S. and South Korea. Now, there was quite a strong statement there. So do you think this may have triggered the North to take some actions?
Maybe some part. It's a defense minister. He focuses on deterring North Korea, defense of South Korean territory, so on and so forth. So by sentence, it has no problems. If North Korea attacked South Korea or the United States with nuclear weapons, we definitely would retaliate back with our nuclear weapons, and North Korea would be devastated. That's some kinds of very clear fact. But I'm not sure if this statement came out at the right timing. Now the South-North, two countries are developing relations by Pyeongchang Olympic Games, which is called by Moon Jae-in government, peace Olympics. And at this moment, the defense minister, his statement is some kinds of, very hardline statement. So maybe North Korea might have, considered this statement as some kinds of devastating statement.
It did react quite sensitively to any statements coming from South Korea in regards to its nuclear weapons and development program. Now, what could be the reason then for North Korea to cancel the joint cultural performance at Kumgang while pushing ahead with the joint training at Masikryong?
Those two places are different. Kumgang Mountain Culture Center has been built by Hyundai Asan Company, and now it has been transferred to the Korea Tourism Organization. So, in principle, the owner of the culture center is Korea. But in contrast, the Masikryong Ski Resort has been built by Kim Jong-un regime, one of the big achievements of Kim Jong-un regime. So North Korea might wanted to use this ski resort by North-South ski athletes together, which I think is a very good opportunity for propaganda for domestic people. Hey, Kim Jong-un, the great leader, have built this great ski resort. Now South Korean athletes came here for using this ski resort. This is amazing. This is a very good global standard ski resort. And that kind of propaganda would be something that is very helpful for the regime consolidation. So these kinds of differences might have made North Korea to continue these kinds of joint training at the Masikryong Ski Resort, I think.
Then what are the chances of us seeing some major changes in regards to the North's participation in Pyeongchang Winter Olympics up until the Olympics now, with less than 10 days to go until the Olympics? Will we see things go as planned?
Yes, I think North Korea still wants to go ahead and continue and send out their athletes and orchestra to South Korea. They clearly have purposes. By using these Olympic Games and using these Olympic Games for the North-South relations, they want to consolidate the North-South Korea relations, which I think can be a good economic incentive to North Korea. So even though they did not pursue the performance at the Kumgang Culture Center, which is only a subsidiary event, the main event at the Pyeongchang Olympic Games, they will just push forward and then they try to get what it wants to get from the Olympic game.
So North Korea's pop orchestra is also coming for the Olympics to perform during the
Yes.
Olympics. Will we see that happen?
Yes, they are at the same time, on the same day, they are having a parade in Pyongyang, but on the same day, right before the opening ceremony, they are holding the orchestra in Gangneung and Seoul. So this is a very good opportunity to propagate for the propaganda of North Korea. This is an event that everybody in a global arena is watching throughout the Olympic Games, which is a good opportunity for North Korea to tell the people that North Korea is a peace-loving country. They are here for the rapprochement and peace in the Korean Peninsula. All the kind of good reputations of North Korea, they want to, propagate to the world throughout this orchestra.
So as long as there isn't something that really aggravates them to pull out of all these things, we won't really see that much changes in the schedule of their sending their orchestra and such.
Sure.
Okay, well, and what's the possibility of either North Korea or South Korea bringing up the topic of the joint cultural performance at Mount Kumgang again?
I think the possibility is very low. As I have mentioned, reopening the performance at Kumgang Culture Center requires South Koreans, support for the event, which includes the provision of diesel oil to North Korea, which is a clear violation of sanction measures. So maybe South Korea needs to talk about this matter again with the United States. I mean, the U.S. is unwilling to give exception again to these sanctions. I mean, U.S. is now worrying that North-South rapprochement and cooperation and deepening relations would bother the U.S. policy towards North Korea, which is based upon sanctions. The U.S. kept saying that the North-South rapprochement without denuclearization cannot be something that the U.S. expects. So I think if Kumgang Performance Center, Culture Center performance is to be reopened, the South Korea has to talk with the United States again, which is also a very big burden for the South Korean government. Right. So one of the South Korean high-level government officials said that, oh, okay, this is better. Okay, we don't need to talk about this with the United States. We no more has a burden. So I think, rather than having this performance, cancellation is better for us. That's what he said.
All right. Well, there are also concerns, though, that with all these abrupt cancellations and postponement of events between the two Koreas, that North Korea may be losing its credibility, and the international community is, there's growing distrust about Pyongyang's intentions involving the Olympics among the international community. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, I think the North Korea is, trying to tame South Korea for achieving its purposes. North Korea has several purposes for this current development of North-South relations. If two Koreas develop their relations and Pyeongchang Olympic is finished and there's no momentum at all for denuclearization, the U.S. will try to be, much more harsh towards North Korea. And maybe Moon Jae-in government wants to continue this kinds of, dialogue momentum. So there will be gaps between two Korea, South Korea and the United States in their North Korea policies. So I think that is one of the purposes. North Korea wants the U.S.-South Korea alliance to be weakened and less cohesive. Second purpose would be that North Korea, I think, is worrying about the sanctions and maybe wants some economic, support from South Korea. And other purpose would be that by using South Korea as an important mediator, maybe North Korea wants to come up to the North Korea-U.S. dialogue, which I'm not sure it would be very plausible. But all these kinds of purposes are the ones that North Korea wants to achieve throughout the current North-South dialogue. But if North Korea, realizes that, okay, now it's time that all these goals have not been achieved, it's not easy to realize all these objectives, then I don't think North Korea would try hard for the rapprochement. I think that they would try again another nuclear or missile provocations then.
And go back to its old style of
Sure.
isolating itself. And now the South Korean government is hoping that with the North's participation in the Olympics, that it hopes to open a new door of dialogue between the two Koreas, and also it wants to achieve peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. So in order for us to see this actually happening, what kind of strategies does the South Korean government need?
I think the post-Pyeongchang Olympic period is very significant. I mean, if there is no momentum for denuclearization, if there's a momentum for the U.S.-North Korea dialogue, I think the U.S. will be very harsh on North Korea. They would even think about the, limited, military strike on North Korea. So in that case, the stability and peace in the Korean Peninsula would be, unachievable. So we have to first hard to come up with any possible dialogue between North Korea and the United States. I think the current South Korean government is trying hard for this. Second, I think, what if this does not happen? What if our attempts for North Korea and the U.S. dialogue fails? I mean, we also have to be ready for it. I mean, if that happens, the U.S. will be harsh on North Korea. We still want to maintain the momentum of two Koreas relationship. And how? I think, the threshold and standard line for the relationship between two Koreas would be whether we cross the threshold of international sanctions or not. As far as we don't, cross the sanctions, I mean, it will be okay if we continue our relationship with North Korea. So we have to think about scenario B, in which our attempts and efforts for denuclearization fails. And third one, I think we have to think about is crisis management. Post Pyeongchang Olympic Games, U.S. hardline policy towards North Korea and possible North Korean provocations. This will be another tensions, another crisis. And we also have to think about how we can maintain peace in the Korean Peninsula at that situation.
So I guess a lot of eyes will be on what happens after the
Sure.
Pyeongchang Olympics. Thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you very much.